Hello, good afternoon. Could you please state your name and your degree?
Thomas Kersen, PhD.
Okay. Yes. Can you remember taking research as an undergraduate course?
Research methods, yes. I took 2 or 3 courses in that as an undergraduate, yes.
Okay. So where was it that you pursued your graduate education?
Mississippi State.
Okay.
My master's was in Arkansas, and then my PhD was in Mississippi State, so 2 different states.
Okay. All right. And what was exactly the topic of your research or the topic of your dissertation that you chose?
Okay, well, as a master's, I did perceptions of women in combat, whether people supported women in combat, so I did my thesis on that. And then as a PhD student, my dissertation was on pay differences in the military. So looking at race, gender, and all the other things that deal with the military pay, and seeing what things explain the differences in pay outside of rank and seniority, which explains most of it. But so that was my dissertation.
Okay. In the research that you conducted on both of those levels, were they qualitative or quantitative research?
Very the dissertation was entirely quantitative.
Okay. One of my next questions to ask, do you feel that it is important for students to focus on conducting research or being involved with conducting research while they're pursuing their undergraduate studies?
I'm not a person that really thinks the team approach works too well. And if you want a student to really, my thinking about it is if you really want a student to or anyone to understand what is going on, you need to have them get in there and do something they individually are interested in. So I think they need to do it themselves. Maybe have each other as sort of peers and looking over and giving suggestions. But in the end, if I want students to do research, their own project, a paper of some sort, then I would want them to do it on their own.
Okay. And what are some of the areas that you are working on now?
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. In fact, those folders you saw me playing with in there, those are all research projects. So I have about 12 to 15 research projects just in my office. Yeah, crazy. But the 2 that I just finished, one was dealing with Ozark identity. And that's what people call hillbillies up in the Arkansas and Missouri. And so I was tying that identity, saying that these folks have different identity than just being a Southerner. They think they're a Southerner, but they think there's something more. And tying that with the rebel flag and all these other things. So that's one project that I think in the next little while I should get confirmation that's going to get published. Another one is looking at the role of sociology in the 2 states and seeing where we were, where we are, and where we're going. But I have a number of projects, just lots. You name it, I'm probably doing it. In fact, there's one about journalism, in a way, in your college that I'm dealing with. And that's, I'm looking at 2, this is dissenting press, so folks that write newspapers that are out of the mainstream. And there was one in the 1890s in Mississippi, in what is now Gulfport, that was communist. So they wrote a communist newspaper in the 1890s down there. And they also had a little commune, is what it's called, where they all lived together and called themselves comrade this and shared their stuff together, what communists do. And so they were doing that down in Gulfport. But they wrote newspaper articles dealing with how bad capitalism was and things like that. So that's a dissenting press example from 1890s in Mississippi. And then I have another example from the 1960s to the 70s in Mississippi, and it came out of Jackson. And these were a bunch of hippies and dopers and all these other folks coming together. Instead of talking about the economics of the situation and what the problem is, they were looking at how the music could change the world. So in the 1890s, they were looking at how economics could change the world for the better. And in the 1960s, 70s, they were talking about music and, those types of things. And so I've got those 2, and I'm comparing the 2 of them.
So, do you have any suggestions for newcomers or anyone that kind of wants to, I guess take on any research course, any type of level of research,
Okay.
whether it's undergraduate, graduate, or PhD?
Well, PhD is just crazy. You're gonna have to you're gonna have to know what you're talking about before you go into PhD school somewhat before taking on those types of courses. But I would say as an undergraduate, the first and even a master's, because we admit people into the master's sociology who don't even have to have a undergraduate degree in sociology. One of the big things that I see in all my students, and students I'm sure elsewhere do this, is they don't get the book. And so they think you can just learn research methods just by what the professor talks about. That's only as good as the professor is. And then, a professor is not supposed to cover everything. There's supposed to be some exchange between the book, the student, and the professor, somewhere in there. And so they don't get the book and they don't read the chapters, and it becomes like Greek language to them. They don't have an idea. And it's a lot of reading. So that's the first thing, is you need to get the book and read it, and then have a debate with the professor about the topics in the book, or things that you find interesting. I think the bigger thing in terms of, is there someone coming in? The biggest thing is students settling on something they want to do research on. That's the hardest thing I have had with students, and even beginning professors, and folks a little bit along the way between being a beginning professor and an undergraduate. It's hard for students to settle on a topic. For instance, at the beginning of the semester, I teach research methods this semester, and I teach it every fall. I had a student said, "Well, I want to study crime." It's like, come on now. Yeah, can you do that in a semester as an undergraduate? No. So that is a big thing. You need to settle on something that's going to be interesting to you, but something that you can do in a semester. And so that's the hardest thing, is settling on something that you want to do in terms of research. So I do things that kind of hit home for me. I mean, I'm not an Arkansan or from the Ozarks, but I lived there a long time, not a long time, but enough years that became interesting to me about these people that I moved into this place, and here are these folks, they're totally different than I was, or doing research about the military. Well, heck, I did that because I was 22 years in the Army, so it makes sense. So it's easy to think about topics you want to do if you realize, if you have a passion and you want to study something that's close to you, close to home, then yeah, you can do research on it, but you got to make it manageable and make it sound at least a little bit scientific. So you can't just say, in one instance I had a student say, I'm going to prove how some people are not Christian. And I said, okay, that's just not going to work. First off, it's a problem with definitions. Who gets to say what about whom? I mean, and secondly, you can't prove or disprove that type of stuff. It's not science. And so I think any science class, the third thing is having some familiarity of any science class. Because if you take physical sciences or economics or anything like that, you should have an idea of kind of how we do it, except we deal with people, which makes it a little bit more complicated. Not a little, a lot more complicated. But I mean, sampling in biology, you don't get all the animals or critters that you're looking for. You get a sample of that. You have a plan about how you're going to do that research, and you have to write it out, and we have to write it out. So there's a lot of similarities. And I think people need to have a background, even if you're going to be in literature, if you're going to be in mass communication, and you're just going to be talking on air or whatever. If you have a background in this, then you can be cut above the normal reporter who says whatever the AP press release is, what everyone else is saying. Because what tends to happen with journalists, and I read another article about this here recently, is they take what the AP says is significant. But if you have an idea of the scientific stuff going on in your local community, the scientific research, social science, then you can say, well, it's just not about the size of the sample. That's what AP tends to do. Those folks just tend to look and say, okay, if it has a large sample size, then that means this study's better than that study. It's not true. So being a little more sophisticated in the science and methods will probably suit you well in terms of marketability and whatever you're doing.
Okay. Okay. And how important do you think it is for undergraduates to complete any type of research course while they're pursuing their degree?
I used to think art students and students like that, it wasn't the most important thing, but I kind of think it's important for every student to be exposed to social sciences and also the methods, because I just read an article recently, and I didn't realize this, that novelists, whenever they depicted sociologists, there's a role in the book and it's a sociologist there, we're awful, we're god-awful. They have a misconception of what we do. And I think that everybody should sort of have a clue a little bit about what we do, especially novelists if they're going to write about us. And so there were about these 80 novels that this person had gone through that had sociologists as characters, and they were just plain god-awful, or they didn't understand methods or any of these things. So I think everybody should have sort of a background, maybe a different type of methods than what we do, but a methods that gives them a sense that what we're doing is worthwhile.
We was talking about how you didn't like how sociologists were portrayed. I just wanted to know what was your issue with the portrayal?
Oh, okay, it's one-dimensional. So these are 80 novels that this person reviewed that had characters who were sociologists in them. So some character in the book, and those sociologists, most often, I'm saying, what she reported was almost all but two were they really stuck to methods and statistics, took the human element out of dealing with humans. That's social sciences, that's what you're supposed to do. That we were socially inept, so we had some type of issues in our relationships ourselves, and that we couldn't really connect with other people. So this portrayal of that we don't see people, we see numbers, and that we're kind of inept in our own relationships, yet we can tell other people about theirs. All this is really grossly mischaracterizing what we do. And the third thing is that we tend to do research on things people already know. Well, that's totally not true, because a lot of the things that people think they know are wrong. I mean, it was plain wrong. And so that is the where I think novelists, artists, and other folks who may have an idea about what social sciences is, if they even have an idea, they really need to have a little background about what we do, and reporters especially, because they may have a view of, well, sociologists really don't do anything important, so it's no harm if we misrepresent a little bit. But if it's an economist, you have a set of numbers, well, here they are. But really kind of need to know what we do before you talk about us. I think. Maybe I'm wrong.
Because I have major files under the study of social sciences as well.
Yeah. So I think what you guys are doing is just in the same area what we do, so it's not a biggie. But I don't know how many reporters there are just for various newspapers, Clarion Ledger, who have this training that you all have. And I think you really benefit, because as I get interviewed in the past, I have been through by the Clarion Ledger and other folks. They come in with sort of an idea of what they want to do, an agenda, and then they sort of mold what I say to that agenda. And I come back and look at the articles, and I say, wow, that's not anything like what I said. And so I think people with your background would say, okay, this is kind of what they're saying, this is how they did it. It's not kind of following what I think is going on, but this is that, having a counter. Because another thing in journalism that you see in America, at least, is it's only 2 points of view. So if I'm talking about something, for instance, I'll give you an example about this. I was asked, I think by Clarion Ledger, to talk about online dating. And so they had me, as a social scientist, talk about online dating. Well, I have a dim view of it. I don't think it really, I think it's like gambling. On the gambling walls, you see all these people win. You don't see all the losers.
Right.
And so like online dating, you don't see all the losers. They just, on TV, they just, eHarmony or whatever, they just show you the 1 or 2 that win. And the stats are pretty bad. They take your money, and you kind of hardly ever end up with a mate for life or whatever it is. and I said these types of things. I'm not saying it's impossible or not all that. So instead of having another social scientist who looks at the literature too to talk to me, they said, well, that's just his opinion. And then they brought someone from, a couple from eHarmony, a lady, to talk about, well, that's fine, but it's worked for me. Well, that's not really a balanced thing. A balanced thing with another social scientist with another set of data or information talking and saying, well, you know, that's some information he has, but I've looked at this literature in this way and found it to be that case. So they need to be a little more sophisticated in understanding things. That's just not two ways of looking at an issue. And in some cases, there's only one way. There's a correct way and there's an incorrect way. And you know, this fair and balanced crap is just that. So in science, you kind of have to grit your teeth when you read the article and they just sort of match you up with someone who's not a scientist and their explanations just equal all the stuff that you reviewed and all the literature and the data and all that. It's not really, but that's a major injustice to the social sciences and to the public as well, because they say, well, that's just your opinion, social scientists. It's not really an opinion.
Yeah. How do you believe the portrayals of the transgender community is displayed in media, and in particular entertainment television?
I have to be honest, I'm kind of ignorant. I don't really watch, I used to watch TV, but it was, I hate saying this because it sounds like people say this to you all the time, it's before your time, but I used to watch Good Times, what's the one with, moving on up to the Jeffersons. Yeah, so I mean, I would watch that, or I would watch Happy Days, things of that nature. So transgender was not talked about at all for those things. But right now, when I watch, if I do watch TV, it's probably Colbert Report, or no, he's no longer there. But you know, those types of things. So I'm only aware of transgender types of things in mass media through Colbert Report, this Jon Stewart show. You know, occasionally I'll see snippets of things. There was a comedy show, Arrested Development, that would have a little bit of that going on. I don't really know what is going on in the mass media. I think there's a HBO show that has some type of transgendered parent of some sort. I don't know the name of it. I don't see a problem with it, though. I mean, if they're really giving voice to an oppressed minority, which transgender people have been, if they're just exploiting them like media tends to do, try to make a quick buck, then yeah, that's a problem. So it just depends. I'm not familiar enough with transgendered television and you know, the shows. So yeah, I would have to look at the shows and see, are their voice is actually given to them, making them human, or are they just another trendy thing for Hollywood to get on, you know, like the Free Tibet thing, or, you know, every once in a while we get on a bandwagon for something and then we move on to the next thing. So if that's the case, then, you know, that sucks, and the media should just sort of stick to whatever cheap entertainment, Marvel Comics say, things like that.
Only just, you know, I'm on Facebook and I'm on, Instagram and these things. And that's, like you, that's probably where you get a lot of your news, is that right? Mm-hmm. That's where I get a lot of my news, so I'm familiar with it, yeah. I kind of know, you know, so 70s and early 80s are when I was a teen and all that, and so Bruce Jenner was, I mean, he was one of the, you know, athletes.
He was Bruce Jenner.
Yeah, he was Bruce Jenner. I really don't care one way or the other. Whatever floats your boat, do it. Again, the same rule applies. You know, except in this case, if you, and I don't watch the Kardashians or any of these things, but I think they're playing the public, making a quick buck. And if that's the case, then everyone's just sort of cheapened by the whole deal. And maybe even the transgendered community is cheapened by that. So I don't know, it's how you play things, or if you're just giving true voice to a people that are, you know, who need that, then that's something. If he's doing that for that reason, then cool. So you have to look at the motivations of why they're actually doing this. And, you know, I did realize, I saw here recently where he or she, Caitlyn, was against gay marriage, which is a bit odd, considering their situation, or her situation. So I kind of do question her motivation on some things. there it is. I don't know what to say in terms of being, you can do research on it and actually interview these people, the media, and see how I'm sure they're going to say the things that you're supposed to say, the nice, right things, but actually watch them and see how they make their money, and if this is just the next greatest thing and they'll move on to whatever's the next greatest thing, then they're exploiting people.
All right, I read somewhere that more transgender people have been killed this year in America than any year before. Do you think that's because of the highlighted media coverage, maybe, that's on them, especially since the gay rights bill just got passed and things of that nature?
I'm leery to react to, I read somewhere, I'm not disputing the numbers, but I don't have them in front of me. I would say anytime, anywhere where someone is hurt or harmed or killed because of their identity, that's an issue. And I do know, yesterday what happened? We had the shooting out at this community college. We got a bunch of whack jobs running around, and they're hateful. I mean, the kid came out and said he was for Irish Republican Army, and I remember those folks. They were terrorists. That he was, extreme conservative Republican. So I don't know what that means. But, the one before him that had the rebel flag, so you got a whole bunch of people who are just narrow-minded or who have read in media stuff from Fox and all these other places that these, people who are diverse in their opinions or their lifestyles are evil. And I think that's probably more the deal, is that when you look at the talk radio and then Fox News and all these other sources of information, that there are people who really accept that as truth, and that we need to call them on that one. So I'm not sure if it's just the transgender. It's just any, for instance, the kid with the rebel flag, that was African Americans that time, and then there was a shoot up at a church in Tennessee here in the last few years, and those were just very liberal, theologically liberal people. So I don't know if it's the characteristic of the people so much as they just tend to be different than I am, and different bad, same good, and it could be any type of, you could lay out whatever specific thing that is, but I don't think they really care. It's just that they're different. Muslims, gays, whatever.